July 7, 1944. American troops on Saipan woke to the sound of 4,000 Japanese soldiers surging from the mist. It was the largest bonsai charge of World War II, and the attackers knew surrender meant dishonor. Within hours, the fate of an island and thousands of lives would hang in the balance. How could a single charge shape the outcome of an entire war? Saipan sits in the heart of the Mariana Islands, 1,300 miles south of Tokyo. In June 1944, that distance became the most important number in the Pacific. American planners knew that if they could capture Saipan, they could bring their new B-29 Superfortress bombers within direct range of Japan's industrial core. For the United States, this was the next step in a relentless island-hopping campaign. 70,000 troops landed under the guns of a massive naval armada determined to seize the airfields that would make Tokyo vulnerable for the first time. For Japan, the loss of Saipan meant more than just a setback. 31,000 defenders, soldiers, and sailors dug in across the island, ordered to hold at all costs. The Imperial Command understood that if Saipan fell, the war would be lost. There would be no more buffer between the American advance and the home islands. Every supply line would be severed, every hope of reinforcement cut off by American control of the skies and sea. As American forces pushed inland, the Japanese perimeter shrank. What began as a broad defense of beaches and cane fields collapsed into a desperate last stand at the island's northern tip. The defenders, outnumbered and cut off, faced annihilation. No one could leave. No one was coming to help. The battle for Saipan had become a matter of national survival for both sides, one fighting to open the road to Japan, the other to prevent disaster at any cost. On July 6, 1944, as the last Japanese perimeter shrank to the cliffs of northern Saipan, Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saitō gathered his remaining staff inside a battered cave. The prospect of rescue had vanished. Ammunition, food, and water were nearly gone. Saitō, gaunt and exhausted, wrote his final order. Every man was to rise for one last assault, Gyokusai, the shattering of the jewel. It was not a command for victory, it was a mandate for death with honor, rooted in the samurai code and the Imperial Army's refusal to accept surrender. Wounded soldiers, those barely able to stand, even civilian laborers, none were exempt. The order was clear: inflict as many American casualties as possible, then die facing the enemy. Once the message had been delivered, Saitō prepared for ritual suicide. He composed a farewell, donned his uniform, and took his life with a sword. In a nearby shelter, Vice Admiral Chichi Nagumo, the man who once led the attack on Pearl Harbor, also chose seppuku over capture. Two of Japan's highest commanders fell by their own hands within hours of each other, their deaths a final act of loyalty to the emperor. Command of the battered force now passed to Colonel Kiyoshi Suzuki and Captain Sakai Oba. Suzuki would lead the charge. Oba, already known for his tenacity, would later become a legend for his guerrilla resistance. In the humid darkness, officers moved among the remnants, soldiers on crutches, teenagers with bamboo spears, men clutching swords or grenades. The night filled with the quiet sounds of preparation as thousands gathered for a final, doomed assault. The doctrine of Gyokusai had become reality. By dawn, the largest bonsai charge of the Pacific War would be underway. In the gray light before dawn, the American line near Tanapag Harbor felt strangely quiet. Foxholes stretched in uneven rows, some barely more than shallow scoops in the sandy soil, others reinforced with scavenged planks and shell fragments. The men of the 105th Infantry Regiment, mostly National Guardsmen from New York, moved stiffly after weeks of fighting. Many platoons were reduced to half their original strength. A few soldiers sat hunched over mess kits, eating cold rations. Others cleaned rifles with slow, practiced movements, eyes darting toward the mist that clung to the fields beyond the wire. Letters home were folded and tucked into pockets, words hurriedly finished by flashlight or in the shaky script of exhaustion. The morning air was thick and damp, making it hard to see more than a few dozen yards. Out on the flanks, gaps yawned between positions, places where no one had the strength to fill the line. Some men whispered about the night's rumors of movement in the cane, but most tried to ignore the unease. For a moment, the only sounds were the scrape of metal, the low murmur of voices, and the distant rumble of artillery far to the south. Then the quiet stretched, uneasy and fragile, as if the island itself was holding its breath. A 500-yard gap lay exposed between the 1st and 2nd Battalions of the 105th Infantry Regiment, stretching across the Tanapag Plain. The seam, invisible on most maps but obvious to anyone walking the ground, ran through low, open fields broken only by scattered brush and shallow drainage gullies. The seam was clear to anyone who knew the terrain. Company commanders had tried to cover it with overlapping fields of fire, but after weeks of attrition, there simply were not enough men. The foxholes on either side were thinly held, with some positions manned by just 2 or 3 soldiers. A handful of machine gun nests anchored the flanks, but the center remained vulnerable, a direct path toward the rear. Artillery batteries sat behind the infantry line, but the guns were positioned for indirect fire. Depressing their barrels to hit targets charging straight at them would be difficult, especially in the chaos of a night assault. The guns were not set up for an indirect engagement at point-blank range. Officers walked the line in the hours before dawn, marking the coordinates of this weak point and quietly noting the lack of reserves. The Japanese had scouted well. Their plan called for the main body to punch through this seam, aiming for the soft underbelly of the American defense. In the stillness, the fate of hundreds would soon be decided by this single stretch of ground. At exactly 04:45, the silence erupted. A sentry fired a flare into the mist and the plain lit up with a blinding white glare. 4,000 Japanese soldiers surged forward, packed shoulder to shoulder, screaming banzai. The sound hit like a physical force, a wall of voices, steel and pounding boots. The ground trembled beneath the stampede. Men with rifles, swords, even bamboo spears crashed through the gap in the line, some waving flags, others limping on bandaged legs. Machine gunners raked the mass, but the wave kept coming, swallowing foxholes and trenches in seconds. One officer said it was like an endless cattle stampede, only louder, more desperate, and impossible to stop. The first American positions vanished in the flood, the line torn open as the human wave poured through, leaving chaos and terror in its wake. Lieutenant Colonel William O'Brien stood at the heart of the chaos, his command post nearly swallowed by the onrushing wave. As Japanese soldiers broke through, O'Brien climbed onto a jeep mounted .50 caliber machine gun, firing into the mass until every belt of ammunition was gone. Wounded but refusing to withdraw, he drew his 2 pistols and kept shooting, holding the spot as men fell around him. When the pistols finally clicked empty, he fought on, surrounded by the enemy. By the time the ground was lost, O'Brien's body was found at his post, ringed by more than 30 Japanese dead. His last stand bought precious minutes, rallying scattered defenders and anchoring the battered line long enough for reinforcements to arrive. O'Brien's courage that morning would earn him the Medal of Honor, a symbol of the desperate resolve that kept the American defense from total collapse. American artillery crews worked with grim efficiency, lowering their 105mm howitzers almost flat, firing point-blank into the advancing masses. Shells set with impact fuses detonated among tightly packed attackers, each blast scattering fragments through ranks pressed shoulder to shoulder. The ground trembled with constant fire, the air thick with smoke and dust. At an aid station overrun by the enemy, an army dentist grabbed a .30 caliber machine gun and held his ground. He fired belt after belt, covering the wounded and medical staff as they escaped. When the gun finally fell silent, nearly 100 Japanese bodies lay around his position. The charge lost momentum against this wall of steel, artillery, and machine guns working in tandem, breaking the wave into smaller, desperate groups. By late morning, the momentum of the bonsai attack had stalled. The battlefield was no longer a scene of charging masses, but of scattered resistance and mounting casualties. Today, Saipan's beaches remain quiet, but the cost of its conquest still echoes in military planning and national memory. The willingness to face annihilation on both sides shaped decisions that ended the war and still shapes debates over how nations measure sacrifice, resolve, and the price of victory.